Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ramblin Ram. Today, we have a fascinating guest joining us, Siamack, also known as Simon. He's an accomplished entrepreneur with a degree in commerce, hailing from Canada. We'll start delving into Simon's career journey before we explore his passion for fragrances and his pursuit of creating his own scent. Siamack, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rampton, or Ram. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, how have you been? Everything is good.
Everything's good. Everything's well. I mean, these days I'm kind of busy with just using that last bit of summer left. It's almost the end of August. I can't believe that summer's gone.
Yeah, I hear you there. I hear you loud and clear.
So, Simon, can you tell us about your career path as an entrepreneur and like the key milestones that have shaped your journey to the way that you are right now?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say, it's hard to call myself an entrepreneur. I don't see myself as an entrepreneur yet. I mean, I don't think I've taken the risks that others have. And of course, as a result, I haven't gotten the rewards that others have. There's things that I'm working on, projects on the back burner, and we'll get into a few of those. So just for context, I don't see myself as an entrepreneur, but we've been in Canada since 2000. Went to school initially in 2008 for engineering. I dropped out. I spent like a year doing like construction estimating and learning a bit about construction during that year. So I dropped out in 2008. So I dropped out in 2009. And from 2009, 2010 was where I was working. So I had these days where I worked at an office, and I would basically prepare bids. You call multiple suppliers as an estimator, and you get quotes, estimates, and you prepare a bid package to bid on a project. It's actually a very lucrative job. If you were to tell me right now, like if I was going to be unemployed the next day, I would go and take some continuing education courses and do construction estimating, because out the door you can make 100K plus
Really?
bonus. Yeah, for sure. It's just now it's a bit more competitive to win tenders, and that's what you get paid to do. You get paid to contact multiple suppliers, prepare a bid package that is going to be the most conducive, the best rates and the best materials for the guy who's giving you the project as a general contractor. That's how that business worked. But that's aside the point. So during that time, I really got into investing. I had a bit of money in a Scotia iTrade account. This was before when all these modern brokers were popular. And I kind of got into a special style of investing, which is value investing. But value investing in the traditional sense was like too slow for me, and I wanted more risk. So what I did was I started looking for these companies, and keep in mind, this is 2009, 2010. I started looking at these companies where the stock was trading at less than its cash value, which means that if you were to like pay off all the employees, pay out all your debts, get rid of like all your inventory and all that, you would still have more cash than the dollar or pennies per share that the stock was trading at. And so I started putting my money in these because I saw them as deep value opportunities, and that really got me interested in finance. I made a bit of money, but that's aside the point. I didn't really make that much. And so it got me really interested in finance and like how these situations happen, and especially around biotech. And so I reapplied back to school that same year. I got back in. I spent a year doing at Athabasca. I don't know if you've heard of that
Online
university.
university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was fun. It's another adventure. I remember almost missing an exam because I booked it in Ottawa accidentally instead of Toronto. I had to drive to Ottawa. Anyway.
Wait, what? You had to drive to Ottawa to take that exam?
Yeah, they wouldn't let me reschedule it or move it, which is
What?
crazy.
That's insane. That's like what, a 5 hour drive away from your house.
Yeah. So I drove there, wrote the exam. I had Subway and a Coke for dinner. I got back in my car. I drove back. I stopped over at the highway, rested for like 30 minutes, got back in the car and kept driving home. Yeah.
Man,
I got
that's
home at
some
like
like
1
bucket
a.m.
list.
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, continuing on, I went to university for commerce, even though I got accepted to like engineering, life science, and commerce when I reapplied, and did commerce at Mac. Had a nice 4 years at Mac, and
Like as in McMaster University.
yeah, McMaster University. Sorry, and I was really between going into like marketing and sales versus going into finance. I think that I although I had an interest in marketing and sales, I didn't really see myself like that's going to be me. And plus, I was coming in with all these things that I knew from engineering. I failed out of engineering mostly because of physics. Like I just didn't care for physics, but I was good at math and programming and everything else. So I stuck to like valuations and M&A and special situations finance and derivatives. These are like my passions, which we can get into later. And so I ended up graduating from Mac Commerce with honors. And unfortunately, because I'm a bit more introverted, I never ended up getting like a crazy internship or fancy job like everyone else did. I actually even worked at a gas station before I worked at any reputable place. Like within my career, I worked at that gas station for like almost a year. I would do the night shifts because
Did
they
the
paid
university not help you out in any way, shape, or form?
more. I didn't network as much as I should have. It was mostly on me. That's a personal mistake. I feel like a lot of people have been there though, and have made this mistake, but I don't regret it. Funny enough. I'm sure it would have given me an edge though. Throughout those years, throughout that year, I still kept at it though. I remember I would, it was so funny. I was at the gas station and it obviously was a dead gas station at night. And I had like a little Google Sheets and a iPad mini. And I was, making financial models and doing research on these biotech companies that to me seemed valuable, and some of them did really well. And I made like really good friends online who were also looking at these same companies, and we'll touch on that because that's important, funny enough. Then I got my first job as a teller at RBC. I learned a lot about selling and like talking to people. Number one thing that I probably learned at RBC was the guy who's dressed up all fancy and shit, he probably doesn't have a penny to his account, and the guy showing up in ripped hoodies and sweatpants from like the mid 90s, that guy is like a baller. I'm not kidding. There's a popular equipment rental company in the Greater Toronto area. I'm not going to name them, but that image will always be in my mind. The guy waited in line, and it was like super busy, and I'm sure this guy had better things to do after I found out who he is, right? Ripped up clothes and stuff, just came up, gave me his card, and I noticed that so if you have an RBC card, I don't know if I have my wallet here, so let me show you. So
I don't have my wallet handy, otherwise I would have.
This is what a regular RBC card looks like.
Okay.
He hands me a matte blue RBC card. And for viewers who don't know, a matte blue RBC card is like the highest tier of like a banking relationship that you can have with RBC.
Is it a business card or is it a customer?
It's a personal card. It's a personal card. And so I the first thing I tell him, I'm like, man, you could have just walked to the behind us and gone to a cube for a personal banker to do your banking, because that's one of the privileges of the card. And when you get to that level. So yeah, I really learned about talking to people, and I got to learn a lot about managing money and just how people conduct themselves in Canada. You see people from all across the spectrum, and I saw some shit, man. I worked at a really rough area, albeit in Islington. There's a few more things that I'd like to say, but I really can't on podcasts about my branch specifically. So we'll not share that. But if you were to do some Google searches, you would find some concerning things. It's just the area,
Where in Eglinton? This is in Toronto, correct?
Albion and Islington, so it's in Etobicoke. It's in the area of Etobicoke, which used to be Italian and is now mostly Jamaicans, the Indian community, and there's still some Italian presence there. But most of those Italians moved to Vaughan, and the Italian part is the emphasis on maybe your Google search. We'll leave it there.
So for the viewers that have no idea about geography in Toronto, I'm just gonna lay it out there. So we have Toronto in the bottom, close to the lake, and then you have Vaughan to the top, and then you have Etobicoke immediately to the west of it. So that's the bit of geography that you need to know. If you want to get into Toronto from the west, you have to first go through Etobicoke and then get to Toronto. But yeah, that's so cool. Thanks for sharing that. That was actually a lot of information. You just dumped on us. That was good.
Let me get to where we are today really quickly.
Okay.
So when I was at the branch, I really wanted to be downtown. I wanted to just be close to capital markets and see what comes of it, right? So one of the things I kept being told was you have to be really good at your current job. And I didn't speak a lick of Indian. I didn't speak a lick of Arabic. I didn't really have any connections in the Jamaican community to, make these referrals for mortgages or investments, so on and so forth. But one thing I realized was that there was a lot of truckers there. So I started selling this card to the people there. This is the RBC cross-border card, really, really useful card actually. And in a year, I became the #1 seller of this card, which is insane. And the only person who was above me got disqualified because most of her sales were to RBC staff who don't pay for the card.
Cheating.
Yeah, so I was able to leverage this, and when you have this, it actually shows up on your internal profile. So I ended up getting an interview at Settlements. I ended up getting an interview at the office for the American Bank, and I ended up getting an interview for account management. I ultimately went to Settlements in capital markets. Settlements, to give you the TLDR of Settlements, it's when you place a trade, let's say you place a trade to buy 100 shares of Apple, there's a settlement that has to happen. So it's instantly reflected in your account and you can instantly sell out of it. But the physical share transfer, let's say RBC buys from Goldman Sachs, the 100 shares of Apple have to leave Goldman and your cash has to leave RBC. Your cash goes to Goldman. Your shares from Goldman come to RBC or wherever your custody is. So I learned a bit about that. I learned a lot about underwriting. I learned about debt instruments. But what I learned the most about was how terribly inefficient organizations are. And
you mean bank organizations or just in general?
So bank organizations live in the past. They use something called IBM Black Screen, and IBM Black Screen was what we used in DTCC, which is a settlement software / center where the settlements and processing of transactions happen. And so that really got me thinking about automation. So when I was on that team, I managed to circumvent some of the, all these enterprise companies, they have these software policies. So I managed to circumvent some of them. So what I did was I installed a Chrome extension on everyone's desk, which let us know of this thing called a debit cap, because each bank in the market every day borrows $1.7 billion. Yeah, $1.7 billion against $200 million of collateral. So depending on the bank's balance sheet, they can borrow $1.7 billion interest-free every day just to perform these trades on behalf of their customers. So to monitor this, we had to do this manual process. So I got a Chrome extension and I wrote a script to constantly check it, send an email to everyone. And that got me thinking of more automations. Then we had this thing where they would, every day on the 25th, so around this time, they would print 35 pages of just entries on that black screen. Mm-hmm. And so I managed to write a script in BASIC, which was the language for that thing, to export it into an Excel sheet and to also automate the entry from the Excel sheet into this text field web page, which was nuts. And that kind of got me interested in tech. From there, I did tech consulting, and tech consulting consisted of simple stuff and complex stuff. So making like working with webhooks, working with Python a little bit, working with Zapier, understanding databases. I feel like that's the number one thing. Relational databases, organized data, query language, transforming data, ETL, and reverse ETLs. And so I got to learn a lot about that. I got to learn about how CRMs work. Especially, I became fluent in Salesforce and HubSpot. And that got me a job in tech where I'm currently at. And I love it. On the side, I have my passion for perfumes. I think you have a question coming up.
I do. In fact, I wanted to focus on the perfume part of your life story because I just find it so fascinating. You have such a deep understanding of fragrances, and so how did you become interested in like scents, and like what's started your motivation to start collecting fragrances?
Yeah, good question. I really liked fragrances. I loved wearing fragrances. People love to, in Western society, people really used to like scent-free environments. But I really never understood that because like Europe, Middle East, everywhere else in the world, people have a signature scent. Like you can smell them, and they smell either clean or they just smell good. Nobody smells bad. One of the things I really didn't like about university was like there were people that legitimately smelled bad. Okay. In university,
so not even cheap scents. They just smell
bad, like BO. Like what can I tell you?
I know it sucks. I've been there.
It's suffocating. My godfather, before I went to university for the first time, he gave me a bottle of Ralph Lauren Polo Blue. What's funny is that I'm actually all out of Ralph Lauren Polo Blue. I just used up all my bottles. I haven't rebought a bottle yet. And I use that every day, almost every freaking day. And I loved it. Super clean, melon, cucumber scent, really nice. And I developed a passion for it. And then my mom would get like these minis. Let me show you what a mini looks like. I'm sure you've seen them, but just
travel
as
size?
an example. Let's just pretend like this is a mini. When you purchase fragrance, sometimes you get given a mini for free, as like a gift with purchase, or like little samples for you to try different scents.
That's what I said, like the long ones with the spray.
Yeah, so when I was in university, I obviously had a limited budget, so I didn't have fancy fragrances. I had these minis and samples I would go through, and that was fun. And I always wanted to buy nice fragrances, but I found them expensive. Like for the longest time, I wanted this fragrance, Midnight in Paris, and it was expensive at like $60. But then, like I remember, it was like third year I was checking. Then in fourth year I checked again. It was like $190 because it was discontinued, and it felt shitty, like just not having them because you really want them. But whatever, I was patient, and when I got my job at RBC, the second year I was at RBC, I got paid out a really good bonus. I got paid out like $5,000, and I thought that was amazing. And with $5,000, and I was also doing Uber. I had this one night where I was driving. It was a rainstorm, and like RBC stage, not related to my job at RBC stage was like almost flooded. I don't know if you've ever been to RBC stage, but for our viewers, RBC stage is like literally, it's a stage where they hold music shows. It was flooded, and I got this ride from RBC stage to Guelph, Ontario, which is like far.
It's like west, like an hour and a half or something.
Yeah, man. That ended up giving me a $390 or $410 ride or something. And so the next day after, I bought like my first niche fragrance, and after that I was just spoiled. And
what do you mean by niche, for our viewers that don't know anything about fragrances?
Good question. So there are companies like this one, which is Gucci. Gucci is known for making clothes. So Gucci is a designer who makes fragrances. And so this is called a designer fragrance, although it's a very good smelling fragrance. It just gets categorized as a designer fragrance. Usually, designer fragrances are made by a company or Gucci. So this was probably made by either Interparfums, Coty, L'Oreal, one of those conglomerates for Gucci. And they try to make the most mass appealing scent to sell as much as they can because they have a revenue share with Gucci. So usually designer fragrances, think more mass appealing. Okay, keep that in mind. Then you have fragrances like you have fragrance houses like Parfums de Marly. Parfums de Marly is a niche fragrance house. So they don't make clothes. They only do fragrance. And for them, that's their entire business. And so they sell typically at slightly higher prices, and they usually contact the initial creators of fragrance to make fragrances for them. They don't go through a middleman like L'Oreal. They don't go through a middleman like Coty. And they just sign a contract with Firmenich and these companies, which we will get to later. And they make really, really out there smelling fragrances so that based on the name that they're niche, they can price a little higher as well. So whereas, of course, not now, but like, let's say like this was back in 2005, if this is like $70, this would be like a $200 fragrance or $180 fragrance.
Wow.
So actually, this is a lot more. Sorry, go ahead.
The other one was the chrome one. What is it called again? What's the name of it?
This one?
No, the
or
chrome
this
one.
Yeah. Marly, Parfums de Marly.
Parfums de Marly. Is that French?
So they say they're French, but this one is actually a pretty bad example of a niche fragrance. It is a niche fragrance house, but
so
yes,
how much does it cost
French.
right now? If back in 2005 it costed $200, what does it cost right now?
So this costs at the stores. This probably sets you back like $500. But on discounters and websites, of course, everybody is an informed shopper these days. This probably will cost you anywhere from $250 to $300 max. You can probably get even cheaper than that, to be honest. Yeah, so that's how I got into fragrance and been collecting seriously for the better of the past 10 years. And I love it.
Awesome.
Sometimes you wake up, you feel naked if you don't put on fragrance. Yeah, man.
That's a way to put it, all right. So I was wondering, do you just buy to collect for your own use, or do you also do business with them by buying and selling or exchanging with others?
Yeah, so buying and selling fragrance can definitely be a revenue stream in a way. For me, I've really lost the passion for selling. Especially, I just sell to maybe break even, but I have made a lot of money on fragrance. This is a pretty good example of one. We'll get into this one, but yeah, I definitely made money with fragrances. And sometimes I used to be known as like a splitter in the groups and the fragrance community. So let me show you what that means. I need to just grab something.
So splitter, as in I'm assuming what it means is you have a fragrance and then you split it in two bottles, you sell it to two different people.
Sure, but think even more extreme. That's along the right idea, yeah. So I have over here, this is Le Labo's Thé Noir, really nice fig scent. It actually smells like Persian figs, to be honest with you. Great little scent. So I would buy this and I would split out the 500 ml flac. Of course, is an unusually large bottle where some bottles are like this big. I would split it out into 5, 10, 50 ml portions, and everybody would get everything that they really want, which is really nice. Haven't been doing that for a while, but I did it mostly because I wanted to have fragrance for myself at a cheaper acquisition price. And you do a credit to the community where some things are like just really expensive for everyone. A bottle of Thé Noir at the Le Labo store, the 100 ml is I think now $380 after tax. Crazy. So I buy 500 mLs for maybe 1,000 to refill, and you split it across, everyone, and you come up with a much cheaper acquisition price. And it's a really nice scent, by the way. One of my favorite fragrances. Not my all-time favorite, but one of my favorite fragrances for sure.
Do you have any recommendations for any niche fragrances that people have no general idea about? Because niche fragrances, the only niche fragrance that I know of is Creed, and that's because it's gone mainstream for the better half of the last 5 years. But that's because it's gone mainstream. So do you have any niche fragrances that you would like to share with us that is
good question,
still niche?
You bring up a really, really good question that is still niche, like kind of out there and niche. Yeah, you know what? In North American markets, this doesn't really apply to European markets because it's well known there. There's a brand called Perfume Roma, and the stuff they make is phenomenal, and not many people just know about it. However, designer fragrance houses over here have tried to kind of copy 2 or 3 of them, which is interesting to see. I actually have a few bottles on my shelf I can show you later, but they're really simple bottles as well, which I really like. But the smells are amazing. There's one that literally smells like sea salt. There is one where it smells like ginger candy. I actually wore it to the office once. Ginger cookies, sorry. I wore it to the office once, and somebody thought that somebody had baked ginger molasses cookies and brought it for the floor because it was so strong. Like somebody I'm not kidding, like somebody 10 cubicles down, and they just said, "Oh, it smells so good in here." Dude, I felt so embarrassed. I had to go and wash off. It was hilarious. Yeah. Profumum Roma, and they're potent scents. They're amazing. Then the other one I would recommend is actually from this brand. I just got to show you this bottle. It's amazing. I don't think you've seen this when you've visited, but next time. So this is a brand called Abdul Samad Al Qureshi, which is a Saudi brand, and I wish you could feel how heavy this is. But their stuff, unlike most Arabic fragrances, is super high quality and really slept on. In terms of Arabic fragrances, Amouage is really mainstream by my standards. So Abdul Samad Al Qureshi slept on. There's a store in Toronto. People should definitely go and try it. I really like this one. This is called Safari, and I think Safari in Arabic means traveler. And then there's one called Safari Extreme. I like both of them. They're not related, but I like them. And this is actually an attar, so let me open it just so you see. It's so sharp, the edges, almost cuts into your skin.
To cut, yeah.
Yeah, so let me just show the viewers how that precious liquid looks like.
Ooh, it looks like a nuclear reactor.
Not sure if I can get that into focus. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that's an attar. You can see the.
It looks very oily. You can.
Yeah, it's very syrupy. So you need just one little drop. So in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, people layer these attars with their existing fragrance, and that's very popular. And the reason I really am an advocate of this brand is because of the attention to detail. On a Rolex watch, when you put the crown in and you screw down the crown aligns perfectly. The exact same happens with this. That is a detail that they didn't have to get right or get perfect, but every time you screw this down, it screws down exactly like this, which is insane. Just think about the extra cost for a high margin product that is fragrance. Think about the extra cost you have to put in just to make that happen. Would you rather have the profit, or would you rather have that? Most companies would probably rather have the profit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
how would
smells amazing.
How would someone someone who doesn't know about fragrances find such fragrances? Is it a specific? Is it a community that you have to join in order to look for a scent? Or are there stores, brick and mortar stores or online stores that one needs to know of in order to look for niche fragrances?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. I wouldn't really, I can't really recommend going to brick and mortar and buying from there. I hate to say that because I just don't want people wasting their money. Always go to discounters, maybe go and try fragrances at brick and mortar. So nowadays, Nordstrom, Saks definitely have niche fragrances. There's also a store opening up called Etiquette in Toronto. It already exists in Montreal, and they have a lot of niche fragrances. They have an amazing collection. And you can try fragrances there. You can buy samples, dabbers, and that's the best part about a lot of niche fragrance stores. They sell you samples in tiny formats, like 0.87 of an ml, which is more than enough to just get the feel for a fragrance. Mm-hmm. Then you join these communities, which is like Fragrance Marketplace and things like that. Sorry, I've got an itch on my nose. And those communities like Fragrance Marketplace, the Canadian Fragrance Enthusiast Group, which yours truly is the founder of, you can get into these and really ask anybody to send you a sample. Luckily, we live in Canada, so we get to take advantage of these. This is a letter mail stamp, which is $2.25. So for the cost of $2.25, somebody can send you what is called a decant, which means it's a smaller version poured into it's a big fragrance poured into a small container for you to sample. So for example, this is Comme des Garçons Hinoki, really nice powdery, incensey, woody fragrance. Now that I've become so spoiled with so many different fragrances, like I can actually smell the aroma chemicals in this one. And this is mostly ISOE Super. I think I got ISOE Super for your dad. He loves that stuff, and he probably gets tons of compliments on it.
I haven't asked.
It's he was telling me, and yeah, this is an ISOE Super fragrance more than anything. It's not really an incense fragrance, I would say.
Interesting. And so you say that when you smelled it, you said that I can almost smell the ingredients. How much do you know about the ingredients that goes into these fragrances?
I would say I know a lot, and if I was to know a little more, I could be a perfumer. I feel comfortable saying that. Like I could tell you, there's fragrances where I used to love them, and then I got familiar with a certain aroma chemical, and I could start picking it out, and then I would go back to those fragrances that I used to love, and I would smell that aroma chemical, and I'd be completely turned off of them. I'm at that level where, I can really just pick things out like this, No,
that's good. So now that you mentioned you can pick things up like that, what are the tools of the trade or tricks of the trade that you've picked up along the way, collecting fragrances, selling fragrances, looking out for fakes, stuff like that?
Good question. So, that's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question. I know.
We'll start off like with the first thing that you mentioned. So, to learn like what fragrances are made of, like different aromas and scents, you really have to buy fragrances that are known for being the best at something. Let me explain to you. So I don't have a bottle of Creed Aventus here. I think I sold my last bottle because they went up in value, but let me give you a good example. 1 second. So there is a chemical called cashmeran, and cashmeran is a soft, woody, musky chemical, and it's kind of like a fragrance fixative. And it smells very comfy. It smells almost like a folk fragrance. You could make a fragrance just out of cashmeran. And like one of the best cashmeran fragrances is actually my signature scent, which is Straight to Heaven. So you can buy like a sample of Straight to Heaven, or you can buy cashmeran on eBay. There's a guy that mixes cashmeran with like I forget what, with some chemical just to make a full fragrance. Then you can buy really citrus forward fragrances. One example is Le Labo's Bergamote 22. And then you get to like really understand what a nice citrus is and what a bad citrus is. For example, I have a bad citrus here, which is a cheap Arabic attar. This is a cheaper Arabic brand.
When you say bad citrus, you mean as in there are different types of citruses, or is it just like the quality of the citrus is
Quality,
lower?
yeah.
I see.
When I think of a good citrus, I think like if I was to close my eyes and if I didn't know I was wearing fragrance, would I be able to tell that this is a citrus molecule, or like would I be able to think of a lemon? Would I be able to think of a lime? And with this, definitely not. I could think of like a lemon leaf, but it's not really a citrus to me. So having a good reference point is really important. Another good reference point for those getting in it would be to buy fragrance dupes of fragrances that are really popular. One of them that's like everywhere in Iran. I'm sure you went to Iran recently, in the past couple of years. One of them that's everywhere in Iran is this fragrance. It's called Black Afghano.
No,
Pretty
I've never
popular
seen
in Iran. And so something to do would be to buy a dupe Black Afghano.
When
like
you say
clone.
dupe, you mean you said a clone, right?
A clone,
so it's
yeah.
a copy.
Yeah, and then get familiar with what's in this. Most of this fragrance is again just one or two aroma chemicals. Most of this one is an aroma chemical called javanol, which is a substitute for sandalwood, but it works as a fragrance completer. So when you have these reference fragrances, I have another good reference one, which is more popular and mainstream. So this is a really good reference fragrance.
Victor and Rolf.
Just Victor and Rolf Spice Bomb Extreme. Really good fragrance. I think this is the reformulated version, but it doesn't matter. Very good vanilla fragrance. For a designer house, very, very good vanilla. People really don't talk about this one enough. And, criminally underrated. Then I have another one, which is in my case there, but, when you have these references, you can build a point of reference and you can start getting more familiar and being more discerning with what you pick. Because when you go to the store to buy fragrance, what sells you on fragrances is the top note, that instant freshness, So with this fragrance, for example, I think it's okay. It's an okay, warm fragrance, wintry fragrance, but what sells this fragrance is that it has this unique apricot on the top. But to be honest with you, if I was to wear more than 2 sprays of this, I would be suffocated. It's just, there's some chemical thing in there that doesn't work well for me. Not a huge fan. But I kind of got sold on it because of those top notes. Now we'll get into your next topic with like fake fragrances. With fake fragrances, I think the best advice I have is that every single fragrance is faked. To give you an example, this is a retail fragrance value of, I think, 450 Canadian. And then this guy is a retail fragrance value of 60 or 70 Canadian, or 80 maybe now with the price increases. It's a really nice Aventus dupe, by the way. I think you tried it.
Mont Blanc Explorer, correct?
Yeah, so good. You just can't beat this one. They will dupe anywhere from here to Cool Water, which is a $20 fragrance, to this, to I've even heard that they dupe these flacons. Number one thing is you buy the seller. That's a saying as old as time when it comes to like these communities, whether it's around frames like your old guest, or whether it's around fragrances, guns, whatever. You buy the seller, right? And that's the most important thing. The most duped fragrance that I know of is like this. This used to be the most duped fragrance, especially in Iran. But the dupes got really close, so people couldn't tell. But you have to just buy the seller. And if you're out in stores, in a lot of these sketchy malls, there will be unfortunately dupe sellers, and that's part of the game. But I've luckily never bought a dupe. I don't know how I've managed, but I've never bought a dupe.
How do you check?
Actually, no, sorry. I did buy a dupe. I bought a dupe once. I bought Polo Blue, and it was a dupe.
So how do you know that it's a dupe? Do you check the serial number against some database?
You can, but usually you have to compare the packaging. What dupers get wrong 99.9% of the time is that the packaging will be too shiny in the dupe and things will be exaggerated in the dupe. Let me show you an example because I have a box right here. So this is a new release. It got released last year or the year before, I believe last year. This is called Coach Open Road for Men. It's a very nice apple forward fragrance. So a typical dupe fragrance what they'll do is, you see how this is like kind of embossed. The embossing will be too extreme. This is kind of matte. So on a dupe, this would be more shiny. Then if it was cellophane, the cellophanes on the dupes are really awful. Like they suck. They suck really badly. And then they'll usually forget details. So for example, on here, I'm not sure if you can see it, but embossed, you can see like a batch code. Like they'll forget that, or that won't match the bottle. And that's little stuff that you gotta watch out for. And by the way, let me just show you this bottle, because this is, I think, of recent designer fragrances, this is probably one of the most elegant looking bottles that I've ever seen, ever, compared to even niche. So check this out. Imagine like displaying this on your shelf, like really, really classy looking bottle.
Is it a spray? Because it doesn't look like.
Yeah, so they've made it look like an apothecary bottle, but it's actually just a spray.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And it has an invisible tube. So this is a new technology that manufacturers are employing. The finality of the tube, like you actually can't make it out from this camera. I can see it from here, but it's made to look invisible. This was a $60 fragrance, well worth the money actually.
Yeah, that's
really nice. You know what? I'm just gonna put this on. And this was a gift from my girlfriend, so I really like it. Oh, such a gorgeous fragrance. Red apples, like it's just apple mania. That's incredible. Yeah, I really like this. I think it's a solid fragrance that slept on. Coach Open Road. But yeah, that's how you tell fakes. Number one way.
So
I think you had a question before. Sorry, go ahead.
So in terms of like performance, how much does it differ than the original? Dupes and fakes, by the way. So comparing dupes against original or fakes against original, how much does the performance differ in terms of longevity, in terms of discoverability, and
you mean sillage? Yeah, discoverability. Good word for it, but it's called sillage. You know what? Some fakes get really close. I'll be honest with you. I've smelled a fake version of this fragrance, Straight to Heaven, and it was so close, I could barely tell. What they get wrong is that, the really cheap fakes, those are the ones that probably the wholesaler for the fakes is buying them at like $10 a piece. Those really cheap fakes, they just don't last. They're gone like this, okay? And usually a lot of them have this remaining smell of lavender or cedar. And that's because those are really common perfume ingredients, and the people who make the fakes, they don't wash the big tin vats that they make the compound in. You know what I mean? So there's a remnant smell of whatever was in it before, which is really bad. The other characteristic of some fakes is that, let me see if I can demonstrate this to you. I probably can. So this is actually a clone house. Clones are completely acceptable in my opinion, but for the sake of this experiment, I'm going to show you what it looks like to spray a fake on. Some fakes are super concentrated because they can't get the formula right. They'll instead get a few notes right, and they'll increase the concentration. So they'll actually use less alcohol, which is interesting. And that means more perfume oils. More perfume oils means more oil. And what does oil do? Oil remains on your skin, whereas alcohol evaporates. So I'll see if it comes across in this screen. So this is a copy. This is a copy of Le Labo's Another 13, okay? And it's a really good copy, by the way. Probably the best copy of this fragrance. It's a very hard to dupe fragrance because of the ingredients in it, to be honest with you, Ramton. And we'll get to that if you like. But the original, like, it does not leave a mark like this. Look at this, like it's dripping from the paper because of how oily it is, and it's not evaporating with the oil, right? So that's why. I'm gonna have to throw that out because it's so strong.
Really?
Yeah, and another, you can come try this. This is an insane scent, like very strong. It's made by Oksha. I know the guy, super nice guy. I think he sent you some gifts as well.
You mean the
Um,
designer itself?
yeah, I know the guy. I know the guy who runs the operation. It's him,
Nice.
his sisters, and his in-laws. They're really nice people. Um, so with Oksha, like you'll see that in dupes, like just counterfeit fragrances. You'll see that kind of thing happening where they just leave this shiny, oily residue on your skin. And real fragrances don't do that. Um, like I just put on several sprays of Approach Open Road. Like my hand doesn't look that different, and I don't want to spray this on it because I really like this fragrance, so I don't want to ruin the smell. But if I was to spray this, like my hand would be oily like this paper. I'm not kidding. Like just imagine like a sheen of oil on your hand.
You can't
Um,
moisturize.
yeah, you can basically moisturize. Yeah, it's almost like having that attar that I showed you earlier. Yeah, that's the number one way you can tell.
That's so cool. So, that brings me to the next question. I just thought of it. When you go to the store and you're shopping for fragrances, you'll notice that on the shelf, the same
Mhm.
exact fragrance, there is EDT, EDP, and then there's
Mm.
cologne. What are the differences between them?
The cologne is usually less seen these days, but it's still there. Eau de cologne is super light, like it's like 11% concentration or less. And eau de cologne is really more for putting on something after a shave or putting on something after a shower. It fades in 2 hours max. It stays 3 hours. But what I think is more interesting to discuss is EDT, EDP, parfum, and extrait the parfum, and then pure parfum. So eau de toilette is like 13%, I believe. Max is 13%. Then from that 14% range to 18%, to 14% to 16, 17%, you get the eau de parfum. 18 to 23, 22%, you get extrait de parfum. Sorry, I might be exaggerating there, but like in the 24, 25, you get parfum, and then with pure oil, you just get pure perfume, which is kind of like the attar I showed you earlier. That shit is pure perfume. It's super strong. Now, a lot of people have this misconception that if they buy eau de parfum, it's going to outperform eau de toilette. It's not true. For example, we'll use the most approachable scent as an example, which is Bleu de Chanel. Bleu de Chanel, iconic grapefruit fragrance, like really good. But now there is eau de toilette, eau de parfum, and I believe they're launching a new one. It's rumored that they're going to launch an elixir, which is going to be like an extrait. Anytime somebody's buying Chanel, Bleu de Chanel, I'm like, just buy the eau de toilette. Why? Because of the throw. The fragrance will have such amazing throw when it's at an EDT concentration, because there's more alcohol to carry the oils. When you get to an eau de parfum concentration, the fragrance will sit closer. So I actually had eau de parfum, and I had all of them actually. I even had parfum. And the number one thing is just like the eau de parfum is not as satisfying as the eau de toilette, because you can't smell it on yourself. Well, no, you can if you bring up your thing here, but like other people will never smell you with the eau de parfum. But with the eau de toilette, I used to have a coworker beside me at RBC, and he wore the eau de toilette. He smelled so good, man, and I could smell him from far away, and it smelled very nice. Like it was inoffensive, perfect. Then there's the parfum, and I have a friend who wears the parfum, and I have to get so close to him to smell it. I can barely smell it. I can almost never pick it out. And those are the big differences. And a lot of people will buy the parfum because one, it's more expensive, and two, because they think it's more long lasting and a beast. And you might find something like funny. You're like, Siamack, Simon, did you just make a mistake saying more people will buy it because it's more expensive? And that's absolutely true. One of the things that we should touch on from an economics perspective is that fragrances are something called Veblen goods. Veblen goods are goods where the higher they are in price, the more sought out they will be, which is that's a lot of like luxury strategy. So that's why a lot of people will buy this. For example, there is people who will buy this because of its exclusivity, because they'll be like, it'll be a status icon for others who can't afford it, right? And I will be the one that has it. I bought this one, of course. I'll never pay retail. I bought this 150 for 50 ml. Well worth it. Really good fragrance, by the way. Not to dunk on the brand or anything for pricing their fragrances high. This is a really, really good fragrance. Was one of their first fragrances. Absolutely knocked it out of the park. Yeah, people, when they go look at the concentrations, they also look at the price, and they get lured in by that higher price because they think they're getting a better good because it's higher priced and a more exclusive good. Not the truth at all. You can see this with Sauvage, the EDT. It's a beast fragrance. All Persian uncles wear it. Bleu de Chanel, amazing. The EDT is the best. Diorome, the EDT, fantastic. There's a few more I could tell you. Valentino Uomo, amazing EDT. I could go on and on. Do you want me to stop?
So one thing that jumped in my mind when you started going off about the differences between EDT, EDP, parfum, and then cologne is that I remember growing up, or for example, in watching it in movies or talking with family, it's sort of set as a social norm that when you say cologne, you're talking about a male fragrance, and when you're saying perfume, you're talking about a female fragrance. Is that true, or is that a stereotype?
Okay, so I don't know the source of where that comes from, but that's definitely true, especially in Middle Eastern and European cultures. It used to be true. Outside of France, of course. And I think I have a rough guess as to why that's the case. And it has to do with one of the first fragrances ever, actually. First mass market fragrance, because the first fragrance was a parfum concentration and everything. So there's a fragrance that you'll probably know. It's called 4711 by Moore and Witz, I think it's called. I probably butchered that. And 4711 is called 4711 Cologne. And the reason it's called 4711 Cologne is because Moore and Witz was founded in the city of Cologne, Germany. For no other reason. It was found in the city of Cologne, Germany. And Moore and Witz just happened to be this neroli, fresh men's fragrance with a bit of a vetiver jasmine base that everyone wears. You've probably smelled 4711, right?
Not by the name. If I see the bottle, I'll probably remember it.
Yeah, just type in 4711 on a Google tab right now. You'll see the one, and you can throw it up on the screen for the viewers if you like.
Sure.
So 4711 was a cologne. While you do that, I'll explain. 4711 was a cologne, and that cologne was basically worn by so many men. And I think it comes from 4711. Funny enough, 4711 sold and still sells like crazy. It's just not talked about. It still exists
to this day.
Yeah, people buy it. They actually sell it in a 1.2 liter format, 1 liter format, 500 ml format. It's so popular because it's very weak, but it's very comfy and safe. So cologne was associated with men who wore that. Perfume was associated with French perfumery. And I believe there's a Latin origin to the name perfume, but perfume used to come in perfume concentration actually when bottles all were like this, where they had little stoppers, the OG bottles. Maybe your grandma, your mother had some, and all ladies' fragrances used to come like that. In higher concentration, they were much more beast mode than men's fragrances, and I think that's where that started, like that whole men wear cologne, women wear perfume. But really it's all perfume, or it's all fragrance, I should say.
Yeah, that's a good explanation there. So currently in your collection, how many fragrances do you think you have, roughly, or exactly?
You're interviewing me at a wrong time. I've sold a lot of my fragrances, and I've sold them just because of the anxiety of having so much dollar value just sitting in front of me, in front of my eyes. Yeah, I used to be at a point where I had like a 300, 400. I sold a lot of them. I made money on a lot of them because the time when I was selling them was during COVID. And so during COVID, interest rates were super low. There was all this money coming into people's pockets from the government. And so I sold into this rush, and I got rid of so many fragrances. Right now I have about 100, I would say, 120. And I love all of them. I often try to sell whatever I don't use. I think a lot of the times, even this deep into the game, I still impulse buy a lot of fragrances, but I don't regret it. It's fun, and you can always get a lot of your money back for it. You're not going to be selling it for like 10% of its price. No way. The ones that you're going to be stuck with are your cheapies. That's why I always tell people to avoid cheapies unless they really like them, because you're the first and last owner of a cheapie fragrance. Yeah.
So I heard that you are in the process of making your own fragrance and that you want to mass produce it. So
yeah,
tell us a bit about that. That sounds very interesting, honestly.
Yeah. It's a project that started a couple of years ago. Pretty expensive project. Creation fee for something like this is $5,000. That includes some fragrance. Obviously, you have to buy the fragrance afterwards. I gave a brief to someone, and I asked him, like, first of all, I contacted my friend who's close to the industry, and I'm like, can you find me a company that will take this on? Because a lot of companies won't take you on. They're not going to take you on unless you have a retainer of $100,000, $50,000. So I'm like, will somebody take me on? He's like, for sure, I'll find someone. And he did. And so I'm not going to say who it is because there's a bit of gatekeeping in perfume. And you know what? You can work hard and find it out themselves. I contacted that company and I gave them a brief. So you have to give everyone a brief. So this fragrance had a brief. The brief for this fragrance was tea. The smell of like Persian tea is this one, Gucci Parome. The brief for my fragrance was a clean shirt. And it definitely smells like that. You can smell it next time you're nearby. And the problem I'm running into right now is thinking about mass marketing. I think the biggest and most expensive part of fragrance is marketing the fragrance. I know the spending dollars of some of the clone brands out there who are trending on TikTok that I won't name. And because I know the amount of money they spend, I know that it's going to be hard to sell something. But I believe that there is probably a market for what I'm selling, and something I'm researching passively.
Interesting. What are you going to name it? Do you have a name for it?
I wish. It's maybe when you smell it, you can think of a name. I've thought a lot about what to name it. It just smells. I thought about calling it cotton, but I think that's too simple, too boring. Or maybe after a historical monument, but it's such a clean scent. It literally, if you were to tell me like this smells like a clean scent, I would believe it. Yeah, this smells like a clean shirt. I mean, yeah, I would believe it.
Clean linen. How about that?
Already been done. There's a company called Clean Reserve. You can look them up. Throw their picture up on the screen. And they did okay. They did pretty well. I think they got bought out by Estee Lauder. They didn't get that much for their brand, but they got bought out because of that brand direction. But definitely, I would want to do a name, and I would want to launch a site. Bottles, I already have quite a few just to do a test run, but I would want serious bottles. I have about 1,000 empty 50 ml bottles just laying around, so I'm covered there. Yeah, it's,
yeah. What about the name of the house? Have you thought about that?
Good question. I have a name and I have a domain registered actually, but I don't know if I want to launch it under that domain because when this smell came in, because it smelled so good, I thought of a second idea around fragrance, and I'm still working on that as well, but I might launch it under that. I can't really release my secrets here, but there is a name and a logo actually. There's even a logo picked.
Nice. Do you have the logo like ready to share, or is it still work in progress?
I don't have it ready to share on this Mac. It's on my PC.
It's okay. We can put it up on the screen.
It looks nice. I can't. I don't have the high-res version on this Mac. Yeah, I can send it to you.
Awesome. So, you've talked about your getting into fragrances. You've talked about knowing about fragrances. I wanted to know how difficult it was to get deep into the subject. Was there some, you mentioned there was gatekeeping earlier.
Yeah,
How
there's always
much of
gatekeeping.
that fluff do you have to navigate through in order to be this knowledgeable, and then in order to get to this point where you say, I want to create my own?
Getting contacts is hard, and because there's so many people getting into fragrance, a lot of the contacts that you will get will just say, hey, I'm busy until the year 2026, sorry. I luckily had a friend, very nice guy, I'm not going to name him on this stream, just because I don't know if he'd want his name shared, even his first name. So he really helped me out. We used to talk about fragrance all the time. He asked me about his brand. I helped him out. I did a lot of market research for him for free. Never asked for a dime. And eventually, I reached out and I asked him, hey, like, I want to do this. Will you help me out? And he's like, more than happy to. And so, yeah, I just had a really good friend that I never asked anything from him. And just one day when I did ask, he did give me an answer that was favorable, and it's kind of got the ball rolling. I don't know where it will go. Maybe we won't even launch a brand. Maybe I'll just keep the fragrance, but it will be the most expensive fragrance I own because it's $5,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how it is. Like, people are really secretive and competitive. I can probably refer you to someone else if they would want to do a podcast with you. And but they're very secretive. I don't even know if they would want to know that they're associated. They would want people to know that they're associated with X brand or whatever. But it's very intense. Like, I have a friend, and I saw like a big brand who is tied to an influencer. Maybe some viewers that know a little bit can tie some ends together. But she went and bought every single fragrance that he had on his web shop, and just to like see them and study them and research them. And I thought that was insane. I thought that was nuts. Like, that's how competitive it is. Then there's companies that are founded just because they see the profitability. So I know for a fact that there's a company called Dossier, and Dossier, you might see some ads for them every now and then on Instagram or TikTok. And they basically threw money at the problem. So you either have to have a lot of money, or you have to have balls to like convince these people to work with you. And that's how it is. Like, there's no other way. Yeah. Dossier, to give you some perspective, a billionaire-backed Dossier, and Dossier is not even one of the best cologne brands. It's just they throw money at the problem. They don't do their research. They just throw money at the problem. It's like the Dr. Sasquatch of they want to be the Dr. Sasquatch of the dupe fragrance game, but they're failing at it.
You mean the bar soap company, Dr. Squatch?
Yeah. The founders of Dossier are just people who did really well with a lingerie startup / e-com business, and they figured, we'll just replicate whatever X person is doing with another brand, and we'll throw money at it that we've made from our lingerie business. And obviously it fell flat on its face because they don't know the product enough. The other example of this is a brand called Alt Fragrances. I kind of know the numbers that Alt does, and Alt, believe it or not, is backed by a billionaire real estate investor, and his son runs the company, and he's doing an absolutely terrible job at it. I mean, kudos to them for trying, but it's people. It's not something where you could just throw money at a problem. You have to do your tests. You can't be cheap. People that are cheap, they just fail. They just straight up fail in launching a brand. I think the most successful brand that's grown and become slowly mainstream is probably like Parfums de Marly, Maison Francis Courkjian. There's apparently a new way to say his last name. I'm sure you've heard of Courkjian. Baccarat Rouge is like a super popular fragrance now. What else would be a popular fragrance brand to tell you about that started like Kayali? Kayali is like all over the place. I'm sure you've even seen Kayali. Or your female listeners have definitely seen Kayali. And Kayali did their research. They hired the best perfumers and they did so much market research and they went into it. But otherwise, you can't just like buy formulas and expect them to work without doing research and marketing properly.
I just want to piggyback on something that was said earlier with regards to the fragrance itself. Is there any like restrictions that have been put in place over time with regards to the ingredients of the fragrances, and why is that?
Yeah, for sure. So much to say about that. I'll give you another good example. Not on the table. Actually, well, maybe that one. This one is one of them. All right. So, yes, you're absolutely correct. There is a board called IFRA, and IFRA regulates fragrances, cosmetics, detergent products, anything that's scented, anything that takes into like aroma chemicals into it. And aroma chemicals get rechecked by scientific papers every year, and people spend millions checking these. So it's pretty serious. There's fragrances that get butchered by reformulations, and then there's fragrances that get discontinued because of IFRA rules cause them to like not be able to create the same smelling fragrance. The most popular is like Creed Aventus. Creed Aventus launched in 2010, 2011, and in 2010, Creed Aventus was this smoky fragrance. It was more smoky than it was fresh, but it had that freshness in it. So a lot of people that wore it, some people would even joke that, hey, did you smoke? Because it was so smoky. And I actually have the raw ingredient here, lucky for you. I'll show you that banned ingredient. It's called Juniperus oxycidris. Can you see that?
Looks like some sort of extract.
So they call it cade. Cade oil. Cade is literally from the juniper plant. Okay. When you destructively distill it, which means you literally burn it away to extract all the little oils out of it. And it smells like a barbecue in its raw form and its high concentration form. But as you dilute it, you get this nice leathery, smoky smell, which is amazing. But they found that cade, and it makes sense because it has so much carbons in it, carbon atoms can be cancerous. So they banned cade. So in 2014, Creed Aventus had its first set of reformulations where they introduced an anise note and things like that. So the smell completely changed, and today's Creed Aventus is a different fragrance, basically. That's one example of a chemical just being outright banned. A second example is what makes fragrances diffuse. What makes fragrances diffuse is a huge topic, and from a chemical and perfumer perspective, I'm not that familiar with it, but I know some things. So there's a chemical called lyrol, which is meant to replicate the smell of lily of the valley, but it has an interesting property that it makes fragrances more diffusive. They found that lyrol is an irritant 4 years ago, and 3 years ago it got pulled from the market. You could no longer use lyrol on fragrances. This fragrance is, if you know the brand Le Labo, it's a very hipster brand. This is a bottle of Gaillac 10 from 2019. And Gaillac 10, for reference, is a very muted fragrance that smells incredible. It smells super clean. It was created for the Japanese market where wearing fragrance is considered taboo.
Muted as in you don't recognize it when you walk into the room, right?
You'll leave a trail, but it's not going to fill a room up. The current iteration of Gaillac 10, since the lyrol ban, like you basically don't smell it. So it's been neutered, basically. It's a shadow of what it used to be. The same is true for here, where they've limited the amount of javanol you can use in a fragrance and the amount of cassis you can use in a fragrance. Still, this is a beast, even if you buy it today. Black Afghana, really nice, smoky, warm scent. Then there's cashmere. Cashmere has been limited too as well. But the best example is lyrol, because people probably started noticing that after 2020, like fragrances just didn't project the same, and it's because of lyrol. And there is no true substitute for that diffusive quality of lyrol. There's a substitute for the smell quality, but not that chemical diffusive property where it carries molecules further than they usually go.
Interesting.
And those are the implications of reformulations. And you know what? Some of the ingredients have been banned so heavily that, you know, when your dad was wearing fragrances like Dior's Eau Sauvage or Yves Saint Laurent Kouros, those were eau de toilettes. Okay, they would last forever, and they would project like a beast. Polo Green, for example. What did your dad used to wear? Tell me.
He used a Sauvage, the old formulation of Sauvage that didn't even have a spray. It was like...
I gave it to him, right? I gave him a backup bottle, I think. What else did you use? Do you know? Or is that the only one you know?
That's the only one I know.
So those used to be a beast, right? And they were so low concentration. But when they get reformulated, like, and those ingredients are banned, it just doesn't smell the same, man. Another ingredient that's banned is carnation. Carnation flowers kind of have this powdery floral smell, and they're considered an irritant, so it's banned. Another ingredient that's banned is what do you call that? Not civet, castoreum, and a real civet is banned, I think, or it's limited in quantity. And nitro musks are banned. A lot of Chanel fragrances had these things called nitro musks, but they found out they were cancerous, so they banned them. So Chanel No. 5 of the old days smells nothing like today's Chanel No. 5. But fun fact, Chanel spends like tens of millions a year on one laboratory in Paris. Make sure that through all these reformulations, Chanel No. 5 smells as close to its old formula as possible, because it's one of the best-selling fragrances in the world.
This EFRA is limited to Canada, or is it an international?
It's worldwide. Like, if you want to be somebody in the game, you gotta comply by EFRA. There's companies that go and violate it to make small batch perfume, but those people, they're making maybe a salary, you know, they're not making millions. And if you're starting a business, you ideally want to aim to make millions. You don't want to aim to make a salary. If you're going to make a salary out of a business, just go work. You know, you'll have less headache, because working for yourself, you'll be working like crazy hours.
For our listeners, and for listeners that are motivated enough to start their own venture, their own business, or something that they want to start, not necessarily, you know, money related, just a hobby or a little thing on the side. From what you've experienced and from your journey, what is the one perspective that you'd like to share that is unique to yourself?
Unique to myself, I don't think it's unique, but I think the number one thing people need to remember is you should let things just kind of happen, and you focus on the hobby, focus on the activity itself. Don't do the activity for the sake of an ultimate goal. I think that's the number one thing that people get wrong about entrepreneurship. And actually, that's probably the number one reason why people who sell courses do so well, because they sell entrepreneurship as a method to earn some ultimate amount of money, amount of success, so on and so forth. I think the number one thing is to do a task for the sake of its own task. And the Latin philosophers actually have a word for this. It's actually not a Latin philosopher. I believe it's a Russian philosopher. I think his name is like Mikhailensky or something. And the word for it is autotelic. And autotelic basically just means to do something for its own sake. So when you're autotelic about something will come out of it. When you're autotelic about any activity, it could be soccer, it could be perfume, it could be writing, it could be doing a podcast, you'll stumble across a key insight, or you'll attract enough attention that you'll realize that, like, okay, I have an opportunity to monetize in such a way. And because it will happen organically, the growth will also happen organically. That's my belief. I think the best example of this is Miles Coltrane. Do you know who Miles Coltrane is?
No, not that I know.
Um, Miles Coltrane is a jazz musician. He's really popular. And Miles Coltrane, for fun, after doing his janitorial shift, he played the sax like for 40 years straight. Didn't seek out a record contract or whatever. And he would play it at a club. And one day he just got a contract. And he became successful from then on. Leonardo da Vinci, another great example. He kept going. He was initially supposed to paint like the Sistine Chapel. He was supposed to, make a bronze force, and it got rejected. But, it never stopped him from drawing. He drew for the sake of drawing. He got slowly picked up by people. And even through like the dark times, imagine like you're a successful artist from the best university and you're painting dead people, because that's what Leonardo da Vinci actually did. A lot of people don't know this because a lot of people don't really understand the difficult years that Leonardo went through. He painted dead people for quite a bit of his life, and but he kept at his side projects. He would paint motion and he would draw motion. That's what made him the genius that he is. He drew things in motion which nobody else ever did. He drew things from an engineering perspective which nobody else ever did at that time as an artist. That's because he did it for the sake of the activity itself. He didn't do it for an ultimate goal. He didn't seek out doing the Mona Lisa, and he suddenly stumbled across this Mona Lisa, which almost like, the photo almost talks to you. It smiles without smiling. There's been like computations around the Mona Lisa, but his intent was rather innocent. He was just painting for the sake of painting, drawing for the sake of drawing. And so doing things for the sake of themselves is the most important thing, I feel.
That's very insightful. Simon, thank you very much for sharing your remarkable journey with regards to your challenges and your your pitfalls and valleys, and with regards to your knowledge about fragrances and your entrepreneurship behind it. To all our listeners, stay tuned for Simon's exciting perfume launch, hopefully. And remember that following your passions can lead to extraordinary results, but do it for the beauty of the work itself, just like Simon said right here. All right, everyone, don't forget to subscribe to Ramblin Ram. If you like this episode, share it with your friends, with your family, with your grandmother, with your flight attendant, whoever might find this interesting. And stay tuned for Simon's perfume launch. Simon, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.